Sometimes you take intro psychology and it seems to have pieces that don't fit together, like a bad jigsaw puzzle. In reality, they fit together, and we try to show how all branches of psychology are relevant to the lives of persons.
It's not easy to make the connection between social psychology and brain and behavior. And so that spurred us to make a textbook that helped tell some coherent story.
This has two big advantages. One is it's a lot more interesting, and the other is that it makes all the material more comprehensible to students.
About 8 years ago, I was teaching the brain and behavior chapter. I saw his arm go up.
I wanted to know if there was any way that there could be a tie with synapses and what that would mean in terms of behavior. I didn't really see a connection.
It was the question I feared, and I knew I didn't have an articulate answer. So I stumbled through something, and that really struck me. I thought about that a lot.
We realized it was worth doing the book. It was possible to write a book that was potentially superior to the other books that are on the market. A given phenomenon is considered at three different ways: on scientific research, on people and the social settings in which they live, on mental processes, thinking processes and emotional processes, and the brain, the neural systems that allow people to think and be persons.
Imagine we wanted to understand, why do girls underperform boys on math tests? One way to answer that question is to consider stereotypes.
Imagine a girl who's sitting down to take a math test. Her experiences can be understood at three levels. The first is the level of persons. She may be reminded of the stereotypes that girls are worse than boys in math, and become concerned that if she doesn't ace the test, she'll confirm the stereotype.
But you don't get the full picture. You really need to dig deeper and talk about what's happening at the level of the mind. If you're on a high-stakes math test and you are thinking about that stereotype, you're experiencing anxiety. That's not always going to foster performance. Well, it might be even more useful to understand what's happening at the level of the brain.
Research shows that stereotypes can increase activity in regions of the brain that produce emotions. This emotion-producing region does not contribute to the solving of math problems. In this way, all three levels contribute important information to our understanding of psychology. The book has a person, mind, brain, and action feature. What person, mind, brain, and action does is asks a question about a person at the top, that asks questions about how stereotypes might affect a person's performance, and then shows how that question can be answered through three types of scientific research on people, the mind, and the brain.
The pedagogical program for the book, it had to be engaging, but it also had to be comprehensive. So peppered throughout the book are instances of what we call in-your-life questions. And so, for instance, when students first learn about norms and how they influence our behavior, they're asked the very simple and obvious question: what are the norms of where you're sitting right now? Bloom's taxonomy plays a huge role in the book. Each section begins with preview questions that are designed to pique readers' interest. At the end of each major section are what we call "What do you know?" questions. And those are designed as formative assessments, so they're designed to be challenging, but not so challenging that students say, "I'm not going to answer that." Later on in the chapter, we have a self-test, and they assess students' learning at even higher levels. Later on in the chapter, we have open-ended questions for discussion.
The book also shows you how person, mind, and brain findings in different chapters connect to one another in a feature called PMB Connections.
This book was developed alongside with the digital components. It was for the sake of getting students to engage with the text even more, to try experiments online to increase that engagement.
Each of the chapters has a try this activity, which is a psychology experiment. At some point, the student is asked to stop reading. And so the student stops, goes back to a website, does the experiment, and then returns to the book. And this occurs before they get to the coverage in the chapter that is the coverage of that experiment. And so it turns the world of psychological research from an abstraction to something that you yourself just did 10 minutes ago. These are technologies that can make a course much more involving, engaging, experiential for the student. Writing the book was very immersive. It was almost like mentally role-playing. I'm a memory psychologist for this part of this year, and I'm a clinical psychologist for this part of the next year.
Dan was my grad school advisor, And so it was such a natural extension to continue working with him. Working with him just comes so naturally. We work so well together. We have the same sense of humor.
I didn't think anything would materialize from asking one question in a freshman psych class. Sometimes the big things start with little questions.